searching for something more. Mina and Izuku. Mina, a charismatic girl who always had a smile on her face, was walking alone after school. The afternoon sun shone softly on her pink hair. She was usually seen smiling, but at that moment, her gaze was dim. At school, she would laugh and joke with her friends in class, always the first to suggest fun ideas or throw out sarcastic remarks that made everyone laugh. But in moments like this, when the laughter faded and only the sound of the wind remained, that smile would disappear. When no one was watching, in those moments when she was alone, Mina would observe how her friends walked hand in hand with their partners, laughing and sharing affectionate, knowing glances. Seeing that love made her heart shrink. She had friends and enjoyed their jokes and adventures, but it wasn't the same. Something was missing, that intimate, deep connection that everyone else seemed to find so easily, but for her, it felt like a distant dream, impossible to reach. As she continued walking, she knew she wanted something more. Not just fleeting fun or shallow company. She wanted someone who could understand her, someone with whom she could be completely herself without fear of judgment. But where would she find someone like that? It wasn't like destiny was going to make the perfect person appear at the right moment, or was it? And yet, at that very moment, she saw him. A boy with green hair and a melancholic gaze stood at the edge of a bridge, on the other side of the street. With his hands tucked into his pockets and his eyes lost in the horizon, his face showed a vacant expression as the breeze gently tousled his hair. Mina watched him, and a knot formed in her chest when she realized how familiar that expression was. That look in his eyes, it was like looking at herself in a mirror. She couldn't let someone who seemed to understand her pain so deeply go so far as to end his life. She couldn't just stand there, watching without doing anything to help him. In that moment, her hero instinct awakened. She acted instantly, moving quickly and weaving through the speeding cars, her heart pounding as she ran toward him. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she shouted with all the strength in her lungs, running toward him, just a few steps away from reaching him. The boy's green eyes widened in surprise, just before she lunged toward him. Mina didn't calculate the momentum correctly. The impact knocked them both off balance, and they fell over the edge of the bridge. "Are you freaking stupid?" he shouted, watching as her eyes squeezed shut in terror while the ocean rushed toward them at terrifying speed. Shit. Izuku cursed his luck. There were only seconds before the impact, and the girl was frozen in fear. He clicked his tongue, frustrated, and without thinking any further, pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. He held her firmly against his chest, ready to be her shield. Seconds later, she felt the impact, but it wasn't as brutal as she had imagined. The crash of the water surrounded her, but something was protecting her. That's when she realized there was a strong hand gripping her waist. She did her best not to swallow water, holding her breath as the waves tossed her around. After a few moments of chaos, she felt a solid surface beneath her body. She coughed lightly and, cautiously, opened her eyes a little. Despite the fear still pounding in her chest, her gaze met the boy's. He was lying beside her, breathing heavily. His soaked hair clung to his face, and his chest rose and fell with each ragged breath. Whack! The boy spat out water, bringing a hand to the corner of his lips. His breathing was still uneven, and his hands were still shaking. "Can you open your damn eyes already?" he growled, looking at her with a mix of anger and exhaustion. Mina opened her eyes fully, realizing that they were indeed on the shore of a beach. Both of them were soaked, and she still felt a little dizzy from everything that had happened. Izuku let out a bitter laugh, the irony of the situation hitting him hard. As if his week couldn't get any worse. First, his mother and his twin sister had abandoned him. No explanations, no goodbyes. Just a cold, cruel note with two words that still echoed in his head: "Goodbye, loser." It hurt. Of course, it hurt. But Izuku had known for years, he was never loved. Somehow, he had learned to live with it. But then, a blow even more devastating came. His girlfriend, Katsumi Bakugo, the girl he had been in love with since childhood, the one he had worked so hard to win over, had finally returned his feelings. They had been together for a month, and in that brief time, Izuku had felt something he thought was impossible: happiness. Her love had grounded him, given him strength not to think about his family's betrayal. Until that very morning, when the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. In front of everyone, Katsumi revealed that she had only been with him because of a bet. A cruel joke among friends. The bet was simple: pretend to be his girlfriend for a month. Nothing more. "Come on, Deku, don't feel so bad," she said with a mocking smile, ignoring the pain she was causing him, ignoring the fact that he had truly loved her. "You and I both knew I was too much for you. But hey, if it makes you feel better, it was fun while it lasted." She said it with such indifference, with such coldness, that Izuku felt something inside him break. She had played with his feelings and was now discarding him as if he were nothing. As if he were just an object, something worthless. That's why, at the end of classes, he walked aimlessly, lost in his thoughts, until he ended up at the edge of a bridge. Staring at the water, his mind consumed by pain, he didn't even notice the presence of another person, until some crazy girl tackled him out of nowhere and threw him into the sea. Izuku stared at her, his green eyes shining with irritation. He was not at his best, and now a complete stranger had attacked him and literally thrown him off a bridge. Izuku brought a hand to his forehead, trying to calm himself. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he exhaled, frustrated. "I know Kami hates me, but I didn't expect him to send someone to finish me off." Mina blinked, not knowing how to respond. "But, you were going to jump," she stammered, her voice filled with uncertainty as she searched for the right words to explain herself. The boy looked at her for a few seconds, then let out a dry laugh, completely devoid of humor. "Are you kidding? I was just looking at the damn horizon. I wanted a quiet moment, but now I can't even have that." He stood up with some difficulty, his body sore from the impact he had endured while protecting her. He ran a hand through his wet hair and looked at her with annoyance. Mina felt like an idiot. She wanted to be a hero, but she had ruined things in the worst possible way. Still, she couldn't stop her eyes from following the boy. That simple gesture of running his hand through his hair, that calm expression, made him look incredibly handsome. She lightly slapped her cheeks, embarrassed for having such thoughts at that moment, and her face turned red with shame. Izuku noticed her strange behavior and, even though he wanted to say something more, he simply shook his head. "You know what? Forget it. At least I did something heroic before giving up on my dreams." He turned around, ready to leave, but Mina, still sitting on the sand, couldn't let him go without saying something. Her heart was pounding hard against her chest, as if it were pushing her to do something impulsive. "Mina. Mina Ashido." He stopped. He looked over his shoulder, his green eyes showing a mix of resignation and surprise, as if he didn't know how to react to what he had just heard. "Izuku. Izuku Midoriya." That was all he said as his eyes traced over her face one last time, as if trying to memorize every detail. Then he started walking away along the beach, leaving a trail of footprints in the damp sand that the water slowly began to erase with each wave that touched the shore. Mina stayed there. She placed her hands over her chest, feeling the irregular beating of her heart. She felt strangely happy, but at the same time, she couldn't forget that look. That deep sadness in Izuku's eyes when he mentioned his dreams. She could feel the pain behind those words, the pain of wanting something and not being able to have it. She knew that feeling well. She felt the same way. She didn't waste another second. She quickly stood up and started following the footprints he had left in the sand. "Damn it! How did he get so far?" she muttered under her breath as she ran down the street, the wind whipping against her face and the rhythm of her steps quickening, growing more desperate with each passing second as she tried to catch up with him. The drops of water falling from Izuku's soaked clothes formed an irregular trail on the ground, guiding her like breadcrumbs. She kept running until she turned a corner and finally saw him walking a few steps ahead, about to enter a house. "Wait!" she shouted so loudly that the few people passing by turned to look at her. Mina felt her cheeks burn as she forced a shy smile and approached Izuku, who had already stopped walking. It was then that she realized, she had no idea what to say to him. "Think, Mina, think," she told herself, trying to force her brain to come up with something coherent. Izuku watched her with a frown, clearly confused by her erratic behavior. Finally, Mina spoke. "I still haven't thanked you for saving me from the fall." Her voice came out softer than she had anticipated. She started searching through her backpack, looking for something to offer him as a token of gratitude. She wanted to give him an apple. But when she looked back, her eyes widened in realization. My backpack. She looked at him, as if expecting an answer. Izuku let out a small laugh, something between mockery and genuine amusement. Hey, don't look at me. Next time you decide to jump off a bridge, make sure you're not carrying anything with you. Mina brought a hand to her face, feeling the embarrassment rising to her ears. My mom's going to kill me. Izuku lifted his gaze toward the sky. The sun was starting to set, staining the horizon with dark shades. Then he realized that both of them were still soaked, and the cold was starting to seep into his skin. He figured the girl next to him must be feeling the same way. It's late, he finally said, gesturing with his head for her to follow him. I'll give you some dry clothes to change into. I'll also let you use my phone, call your parents and tell them you're staying at a friend's house. Achoo! Mina sneezed loudly and quickly covered her nose, blushing again. Izuku sighed but opened the door to his house and let her in. Mina glanced around, noticing that the place was fairly simple but tidy. The air smelled clean, with a faint touch of detergent and something else, something that smelled like lavender. However, the strangest thing was the number of frames turned face down on the shelves and tables. Mina frowned and approached one, her curiosity overpowering any sense of discretion. She reached out to lift it, but Izuku appeared behind her and gently took her wrist. Stop poking around where you don't belong, he said in a cold tone. Izuku walked away, heading toward a room and returning with a set of women's clothes. He placed them over the back of a chair and looked at her directly. This should be your size. Take a shower and change. Mina took the clothes and looked at him with some confusion. Whose clothes are these? Izuku didn't answer. His expression remained neutral as he turned on his heels and left the room without another word. Mina frowned, holding the clothes in her hands. The fabric was soft, slightly worn, but well cared for. She wondered if they belonged to someone close to him. The way Izuku had reacted, with that tense, closed expression, suggested that the answer to that question wasn't something he was willing to share easily. She stayed silent for a moment, feeling a strange tightness in her chest. Why was she so curious about him? It wasn't just his distant behavior, but the sadness hidden behind those green eyes. There was something broken in him, something he wouldn't let anyone see. But Mina had seen it, and for some reason, that only made her want to know him even more. Because she also felt broken. Broken by those moments when she felt like she was alone, with no one to love her. Even though no one ever said it out loud, she knew her appearance wasn't normal, and more than once, she had looked in the mirror and seen someone she didn't want to see. She always put on a smile for the world, but deep down, there was that lingering feeling that no one would ever love her for who she was. Achoo! Mina sneezed hard, feeling the cold seep even deeper into her bones. She hurried to the bathroom, grateful that Izuku had offered her dry clothes. Steam began to fill the small room as the hot water ran down her body, relaxing her tense muscles. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth surround her and melt away the cold she felt. After drying herself off and getting dressed in the clothes Izuku had given her, she left the bathroom and walked toward the living room. Izuku was sitting at a low table with 2 plates of food in front of him. He didn't say anything when she entered, simply started eating calmly, his eyes fixed on his plate. Mina sat down across from him, feeling slightly uncomfortable with the silence surrounding them. Mina took a bite of rice with her chopsticks and tasted it with curiosity. Did you cook this? She asked, looking up. Izuku nodded indifferently. It's nothing special. She gave him a small smile. It tastes good. However, he didn't react. Suddenly, Mina realized the situation. She was in the house of a boy she barely knew, and she was going to spend the night there. Izuku seemed to notice her nervousness because he lifted his gaze and calmly said, "Don't worry. There's a room where you can sleep alone." Mina felt the heat rise to her face. I wasn't worried about that." Izuku raised an eyebrow but said nothing else. After a somewhat awkward goodnight, Mina settled into the room Izuku had shown her. The mattress was soft, and the sheets carried a fresh, clean scent. She pulled the covers up to her chin, letting sleep slowly overtake her. Hours later, a sound woke her up. It was a groan. Heavy breathing. Mina's eyes snapped open as she sat up, listening closely to the noise. It was coming from the backyard. She got up carefully and walked toward the window. Gently, she pulled back the curtain, leaving just a small gap to see without being noticed. Her breath caught when she saw Izuku on the ground, his hands pressed into the wet grass. He was doing one-handed push-ups, his body drenched in sweat, and his breathing was turning ragged. His teeth were clenched as his face reflected a mix of pain and unwavering determination. Mina frowned. She could tell he wasn't used to this kind of training. His movements were clumsy, uneven, and his arm trembled under the weight of his body. She wanted to tell him to stop before he hurt himself, but then she heard him mutter something. "They can all go to hell." Izuku's voice was low and filled with hatred. "They think I've given up, but screw them. I'm not giving up for their sake." Mina felt a chill run down her spine. Who was he talking about? Izuku kept doing push-ups, even when his hand was shaking violently and his body was on the verge of collapsing. His breathing was heavy, and his face was red from the strain. Finally, he collapsed onto the ground, his body trembling slightly as he struggled to catch his breath. Izuku pressed his hand against the ground, trying to lift himself up, but he stopped when he saw a pair of bare feet in front of him. He lifted his gaze and saw Mina's face looking down at him with a mix of concern and anger. "What are you doing?" Izuku asked, his voice ragged. Mina crossed her arms. "I think I should be asking you that. This isn't training, it looks more like punishment." Izuku clicked his tongue and looked away. "Go back to your room. This doesn't concern you." Mina stared at him defiantly, not moving a single muscle. "If you can stand up, I'll leave." Izuku frowned, but despite his exhaustion, he pressed his hand against the ground and tried to push himself up. His muscles trembled, and a sharp pain shot through his back. He clenched his teeth, but his body wouldn't respond. Finally, he fell to his knees, gasping for breath and struggling to steady himself. Mina sighed. "You're so stubborn," she murmured as she crouched down and slipped an arm under his shoulder to help him up. Izuku tried to push her away, but his strength failed him. Without saying a word, Mina held him firmly and guided him back into the house. Izuku stayed silent as she helped him sit down on the couch. His breathing was still uneven, and sweat covered his face. Mina went to get a towel and began wiping his forehead. Izuku closed his eyes, feeling useless. He had failed again. His weak, fragile body hadn't been able to handle the strain. He expected Mina to mock him or make some sarcastic comment, but she didn't say anything. She simply kept wiping his face calmly, with no hint of judgment in her expression. "Why, aren't you laughing?" he murmured, looking straight into her eyes. Mina looked at him seriously, but her lips curved into a soft smile. "Because there's nothing funny about someone trying to get better. In fact, it's actually kind of admirable." Izuku stared at her for a moment, unsure of what to say. Mina smiled warmly and ran a hand through his messy hair. "Come on, it's late. You need to rest." Izuku closed his eyes and let himself lean back slightly, releasing a long sigh. His shoulders, always tense, began to relax little by little. Mina watched him silently, noticing that small shift in his posture. Without thinking too much about it, she scooted closer and crouched down in front of him. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice gentle. Izuku slowly opened his eyes and met hers. In Mina's gaze, there was something different, genuine concern, warmth. Something he wasn't used to. He nodded, though even he wasn't sure if it was true. Mina frowned and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "If you ever need to talk, you know I'm here, right?" Izuku hesitated for a moment. Those words were simple, but they carried a weight that felt almost unfamiliar to him. After a few seconds, his lips curved into a small, faint smile. "I know." For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel completely alone. Maybe that chaotic encounter with Mina hadn't been so bad after all. From that day on, they became each other's support. Mina started seeking him out more often after class, and Izuku, without even realizing it, began to wait for her too. They always found some excuse to spend time together. She would talk non-stop, joke, and laugh, while he would just sigh and keep up with her pace, though he never really complained. Whenever Izuku trained, Mina was always there to cheer him on. She would sit on the ground with her legs crossed, resting her hands on her cheeks as she watched him intently. Other times, she would stand up to correct his posture or help him stretch better, always with a playful smile on her lips. Flashback. One afternoon, Izuku was practicing a kick in the air, trying to reach higher. He was breathing hard, frustrated because his leg wasn't lifting high enough. Mina, standing with her hands on her hips and a playful look in her eyes, walked over to him. "Come on, Midori, is that all you've got?" "I'm trying," he muttered. Before he could react, Mina positioned herself next to him and suddenly grabbed his leg, lifting it without warning. "Mina, what are you?" "Trust me." Izuku froze when he felt her place a foot over his to help him balance, and then his raised leg gently rested on her shoulder as she helped him stretch it higher. Carefully, Mina's fingers traced along his thigh, massaging his tense muscles to help him relax. "Mina, this is a little awkward." She let out a soft laugh and leaned in slightly, emphasizing her cleavage right in front of him. "Come on, Izuku," she said with a teasing tone and a mischievous smile. "You know how many guys would kill to be in this position right now." Izuku's face instantly flushed red, and he quickly turned his gaze away. "That's not helping," he muttered, his voice tense. Mina laughed with amusement, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she slid her fingers gently along his thigh, applying a bit more pressure to stretch the muscle properly. "Relax, Midori," she said, winking at him. "I'm just trying to help." Izuku sighed, trying to ignore his growing nervousness. Despite her playful attitude, Mina was genuinely trying to support him. Ever since he started spending more time with her, the days had felt a little less heavy, easier to bear. He took a deep breath, focusing on the stretch and not on the girl standing so close to him. "All right. I trust you." Mina smiled with satisfaction and continued helping him, though she couldn't help but notice how completely red his ears had gotten. "Like what you see?" she asked playfully when she noticed Izuku, even if just for a second, glanced toward her cleavage. "Mina," he exclaimed, startled. He lost his balance for a moment, and Mina couldn't stop herself from bursting into laughter at his reaction. All right, don't get mad," Mina said, raising her hands in surrender, though the laughter was still clear in her voice. Finally, she eased the pressure and helped him lower his leg carefully. "See? Now you can kick higher," she pointed out with a triumphant smile. Izuku let out a sigh, trying to ignore how fast his heart was beating. Mina gave him a small pat on the back as if nothing had happened, but he could still feel the warmth on his face. Training with Mina was definitely a challenge, and not just physically, he thought as he tried to regain his composure. End of flashback. For Mina, her friendship with Izuku was also a kind of salvation. That feeling of emptiness she had carried for so long started to fade away. Izuku, despite his cold and reserved nature at first, slowly began to open up to her. And when he did, Mina discovered that beneath that serious exterior was someone kind, clumsy, and incredibly shy. Although, every now and then, he had moments that managed to make her blush. One afternoon, Izuku surprised her in an unexpected way. "Kya! It's so beautiful, Izuku." Mina squealed with excitement, spinning in front of the mirror in Izuku's living room. Her friend had made her a gorgeous dress. As she twirled, the skirt flared out elegantly, and the soft pink and sky blue hues reflected the light in the room, making her look like a true princess. Her pink hair swayed with each movement, and her eyes sparkled with a mix of surprise and joy. "I can't believe it. Did you really make this for me?" Mina stopped in front of the mirror, running her hands over the dress and feeling the softness of the fabric. "This is perfect." Izuku, sitting on the couch, watched her with a soft smile. His green eyes softened as he saw how happy she was, and his heart pounded at how beautiful she looked. "I'm glad you like it," he murmured, rubbing the back of his head with a slightly embarrassed expression. "Seriously? This is incredible. Of course I like it." Mina exclaimed, turning toward him with a radiant smile. "I feel like a princess." Izuku let out a small laugh. Mina took 2 steps toward him before suddenly throwing herself at him. "You're the best, Izu," she shouted as she hugged him tightly, not realizing that she had ended up sitting on his lap in a rather intimate position. Izuku froze completely, feeling Mina settle closer against him. His hands trembled slightly as he awkwardly placed them on his friend's sides. For a moment, the warmth of her body reminded him of the cold hugs from his mother and sister, which had always been brief, distant, and lacking any real affection. But Mina's hug was completely different. It was warm, genuine, and full of life. Slowly, his arms wrapped around her more securely, one of his hands sliding up to her waist. Mina buried her face in Izuku's chest, and a goofy smile appeared on her lips. "You have no idea how happy this makes me," she murmured, her voice muffled against the fabric of his shirt. Her face was completely flushed, and she couldn't stop smiling. Izuku lowered his gaze, feeling the warmth of her breath against his chest. Without thinking too much about it, he lowered his head and pressed a soft kiss to the top of her hair. "I just wanted to make you smile." Mina lifted her head, and their eyes met. Izuku's heart skipped a beat when he saw the tenderness in her expression. A radiant smile appeared on her face as she cupped his face gently with both hands. "You did." Without hesitation, Mina leaned in and kissed his cheek. Izuku's eyes widened in surprise as he felt the heat rise up his neck. Mina pulled back just a few inches, but their faces were still dangerously close. Mina?" "Yes." Mina smiled at him, a playful glint in her eyes. Izuku swallowed hard, feeling like his brain was completely shutting down. His hands were still resting on Mina's waist, and she was still sitting on his lap, which made the whole situation 1,000 times harder to process. Mina tilted her head and pressed her forehead against Izuku's, closing her eyes for a moment as she took a deep breath. Izuku felt her breath mingling with his, and without meaning to, a small smile appeared on his lips. "You know, the surprise isn't over yet." Mina opened her eyes and looked at him curiously. "Huh?" Izuku raised a hand and pulled 2 small tickets from his pocket. Mina blinked, and when she read what they said, her eyes lit up like stars. "Wait, is this for the Space Princess movie?" "Izu, these tickets are impossible to get." Izuku shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "I got lucky." "Lucky? This is amazing." Mina snatched the tickets from his hand and held them against her chest like they were a treasure. Izuku looked at her, feeling his heart race even more as he saw the pure happiness on Mina's face. "Well." Izuku cleared his throat. "If we're going to see a space princess, I think it's only fair that you go dressed like a princess." Mina's smile grew even brighter, and she hugged him tighter. "You're the best, Izuku." Mina exclaimed, her voice full of gratitude and excitement. Izuku let out a soft laugh as he felt the warmth of her embrace completely surround him. Slowly, his hand slid up her back and rested gently on her hair. Mina lifted her head and looked directly into his eyes. "Izuku," she whispered, her voice soft and sweet. Izuku stared at her, and for a moment, the outside world ceased to exist. It was just the two of them, in the quiet of that room, with the soft lights reflecting off Mina's dress and Izuku's green eyes. Mina leaned in, and her lips brushed softly against Izuku's cheek before stopping just a breath away from his lips. "I adore you, Izu." Izuku felt his breath catch in his throat. His lips parted to say something, but his brain completely shut down when Mina closed the small distance between them and left a gentle kiss at the corner of his mouth. Completely red, Izuku could only manage a slow nod. Mina smiled sweetly at him, and with a playful laugh, she slid her hand along his face before getting off his lap. "Come on, my prince. We've got a movie to see." Izuku sat completely still for a moment, still feeling the warmth of her lips on his skin. Finally, he let out a shy smile and stood up to follow her. "Yeah, let's go." They left the house and began walking through the streets illuminated by the soft lights of the sunset. Mina was practically skipping with excitement as they moved along the sidewalk. Her dress swayed gently with each step, and her light laughter floated through the air. A pair of elderly women sitting on a nearby bench watched them with knowing smiles. One of them, a woman with gray hair and round glasses, tilted her head with a fond expression. "What an adorable couple. Isn't it sweet how they look at each other," said the other woman, who wore a yellow hat. "They really do make a cute pair." Mina, who had clearly heard the comment, widened her eyes. Her cheeks instantly turned bright red, and she let out a small nervous laugh. "Hee hee, crazy thing to say, right?" she muttered, bringing a hand to her hair and twisting a pink strand around her finger. Izuku looked at her with a calm expression, his smile soft but warm. His green eyes reflected the glow of the setting sun as he watched her. "Well, I'd like that." Mina felt her heart skip a beat. Her face turned a deep shade of red, and she quickly looked away. Izu. She stammered, biting her lip as she gave him a light push on the arm. Stop saying things like that. Izuku let out a small laugh as they resumed their walk. Mina could still hear Izuku's words echoing in her head, and she lowered her gaze, a clear blush spreading across her cheeks. However, she couldn't stop the smile that formed on her face, fueled by the hope that they could be something more than just friends. As they passed through a park, a group of boys approached them. 3 of them, dressed in scruffy clothes and with overly confident attitudes, began to surround them. One of them, a blonde boy with short hair, whistled when he saw Mina. Well, where did this princess come from?" he said, a crooked smile on his face. "She looks gorgeous, though I think she'd look better without so much dress on," said the second one, a boy with dark hair and a wicked grin. "Or maybe we could help you take it off," added the third one with a low chuckle. Izuku stopped dead in his tracks, his green eyes darkening dangerously. His jaw tightened as his hands curled into fists, and even though he didn't say a word, the look in his eyes promised pain if they kept talking. Mina immediately noticed the shift in him. Quickly, she grabbed his hand and intertwined her fingers with his, feeling the tension in his body. "Sorry, boys." Mina smiled with a sweetness that contrasted with the cold firmness in her voice. "But I already have my prince." The 3 boys let out mocking laughs, but Izuku didn't take his eyes off them. The dense, heavy aura surrounding him, charged with quiet rage, made them step back a little. "Tch, seriously," the blonde boy muttered with disdain. "I don't know what you see in him, he looks like a loser." Izuku felt the words hit him directly in the stomach, but before he could say anything, Mina stepped closer to him. She rose on her tiptoes, brought a hand to his face, and whispered into his ear. "To me, you're super handsome, so don't listen to what they say." Izuku looked at her, surprised, and when he saw the sincerity in her golden eyes, he knew she was telling the truth. "You're beautiful too, Mina." Mina froze for a second. Her eyes widened slightly, and a look of genuine surprise crossed her face. No one had ever called her beautiful before, and especially not with that much honesty in their eyes. Her smile grew wider, and with a sudden tug, she pulled Izuku's hand to quicken their pace. "Come on, Izu, the theater is close," Mina said enthusiastically as they walked ahead, not paying attention to the angry group left behind, clearly annoyed at being ignored. They were about to reach the theater when Katsumi's group of friends appeared at the end of the street. Katsumi, standing in the center with her arms crossed and a cold expression, frowned when she saw Izuku holding hands with a girl. She wouldn't admit it even if she were tortured, but a sharp pang of jealousy shot through her chest. Still, as always, she chose to cover it up with a mocking smile. Well. Katsumi tilted her head with a venomous smile. "So after I left you, the first thing you do is pay some bitch to spend time with you." Mina clenched her jaw, but before she could say anything, one of Katsumi's friends looked her up and down with disdain. "And what the hell is that dress? Did you really think you were walking out of Disney or something?" Izuku took a step forward, his eyes darkening. His gaze locked directly onto the girl who had spoken. "Rachel." Izuku's voice was low but sharp. "If you haven't noticed, your outfit leaves a lot to be desired. You look like a nobody, unlike Mina, who looks charming and beautiful without having to show as much skin as you and the others." The girl's eyes widened in disbelief. Rachel gritted her teeth, completely offended, while Katsumi narrowed her eyes, feeling the rage start to build in her chest. Izuku was always the quiet one, the one who avoided conflict, but now, this was different. "So you rented a girlfriend and now you think you're some big deal, huh?" Izuku felt his blood boil. He was going to yell at her, tell her exactly what he thought of her. He was going to tell her she was a miserable brat, that the only good thing about her was her quirk, but inside, she was so empty that she tried to fill that void by putting others down. But before he could open his mouth, Mina, who had also been insulted, noticed the flicker of jealousy in Katsumi's eyes and decided to take control. "Oh, so you're the ex-girlfriend who dumped Izuku over a bet." Mina looked at her with a mix of mockery and disdain, as if Katsumi were nothing more than trash. That made Katsumi scowl in fury. "You must be blind to leave someone as special as Midori." Izuku felt the heat rise to his face, but Mina didn't even give him a chance to react. She turned toward him with a playful, seductive smile. "Come on, my prince." Mina leaned in and kissed him near the lips, though from Katsumi and her friend's angle, it looked like she had kissed him directly on the mouth. Katsumi felt a sharp blow in her stomach, as if someone had knocked the air out of her with a punch. That scene was painful to watch. "I guess he hasn't told you his dirty little secret." Katsumi spoke with a mocking smile, preparing to strike where it hurt most. "He's useless, quirkless, and has no future." She wanted to see Mina pull away from Izuku after learning the truth. She wanted to see her break his heart. She wanted to see Izuku dragged into his own misery, ready for her to pick up the pieces and give him the scraps of her affection just to keep him under her control. What she didn't expect was that Mina wasn't like her or her friends. "You think I care about that?" Mina hugged him tightly, holding on to him with warmth and affection. Katsumi watched the scene helplessly, feeling the rage and frustration consume her from the inside out. "Are you really that shallow that you only see a person's worth based on their quirk?" Mina continued, her voice filled with indignation. "People are so much more than that. They have feelings, dreams, hopes, and desires. But you're honestly pathetic for thinking that way." Every word hit Katsumi like a punch to the gut. For the first time, she had no sharp comeback, because deep down, she knew Mina was right. She could only grit her teeth in fury, feeling her nails dig into the palm of her hand as a mix of anger and humiliation coursed through her body. "But I have to thank you." Katsumi blinked in surprise. "What?" "Yeah, because thanks to you, I met Izuku, and I will never, ever let him go." Izuku looked at Mina, and when he saw the confidence in her eyes, his expression softened. He gave her a small smile before intertwining his fingers with hers, holding her hand more tenderly. Mina looked at him, and without sparing Katsumi another glance, started walking away, intentionally bumping her shoulder against Katsumi's to push her aside. Mina gave her a triumphant smile before walking off with Izuku. Katsumi felt something break inside her. "Bitch!" she screamed, her face completely red with fury. "You're nothing but a fake. Izuku, she's just using you. I thought you had better standards." Izuku looked at her with coldness, his dark green eyes reflecting a deep abyss of indifference. "Better standards?" His voice was calm, but every word dripped with disdain. "Like you, Katsumi." She gritted her teeth, feeling her pride shatter with every passing second. Mina, still holding on to Izuku, tilted her head with a mocking smile. "How ironic," she said, amusement in her tone. "First you treat him like garbage, and now you act like you care." Katsumi felt rage consume her. "Shut up," she screamed, but her voice didn't sound as strong as she expected. No, because underneath all her anger, there was something else. Something that hurt too much to accept. "He's probably only with you out of pity," shouted another girl from the group, Rachel, as she looked at Mina with disgust. Who in their right mind would date a girl dressed like a cheap Disney princess? Izuku stopped and looked at Rachel seriously. "Rachel, I told you. But you need to understand that what really matters isn't what we wear, but who we are. And Mina doesn't need a fancy dress or revealing clothes to get attention like you guys do, because her beauty comes from within, from the person she is. And that's what I love about her." That comment hit Katsumi's group of friends right in their pride, leaving them silent and stunned. But Mina felt her heart race. In that moment, she didn't just feel like a princess, she felt like the most important woman in the world. However, Katsumi could feel rage beginning to boil in her veins, unable to believe that Izuku had said something like that. "So now you think you're all that just because you've got some idiot by your side?" Katsumi growled, clearly annoyed. "Do you really think that just because some girl looks at you twice, you're suddenly special? You're still a useless quirkless nobody. Don't forget that." Izuku didn't even turn to look at her. He simply tightened his fingers around Mina's hand, and she leaned into his arm, completely ignoring Katsumi's and her friends yelling. "Come on, Aizu, the theater is close." Mina gently pulled him forward so they could keep walking. Izuku followed her without hesitation. "You're both idiots." Katsumi screamed at the top of her lungs. "You won't last a week." But neither of them turned around to look at her. Katsumi watched with fury as they walked away, her fists trembling from how tightly she was clenching them. Her friends tried to calm her down, but she pulled away, feeling a sharp pain in her chest. A single tear slid down her cheek, betraying her true feelings. And it hurt, because Izuku, the one who had done the impossible just to be her boyfriend, the one who had chased after her for years, didn't look back at her even once. "I hate them." Katsumi muttered with contempt, but the bitterness in her voice was obvious. She didn't feel hatred toward Izuku. She felt something else, something she would never admit. She clenched her fists tightly. Why did it bother her so much? Izuku wasn't her problem anymore, right? So why did the image of Mina holding hands with Izuku make her throat tighten? Why did Izuku's bright smile when he looked at Mina cause that sharp pain in her chest? Her friends' voices faded into the air as Katsumi turned around and started walking with no particular destination, her breathing unsteady, tears threatening to fall. She didn't look back. She didn't want to admit it. She didn't want to accept that she had lost him. That she had let him slip away. At the theater, Mina and Izuku were having a great time. The movie was about a princess from space who fell in love with a prince from Earth. Mina was completely enchanted by the story, her eyes sparkling like stars every time the princess and prince shared a romantic moment. She would cling to Izuku's arm during the intense scenes, and during the happy moments, she'd let out a sweet, contagious laugh. Izuku, on the other hand, was watching the movie, or at least trying to. His attention kept drifting toward Mina's face. The way her eyes lit up when the princess found happiness, the way she would gently bite her lower lip when something excited her too much. His heart raced every time Mina leaned on his shoulder or intertwined her fingers with his. He couldn't help but smile. "Ah, this is so cute," Mina whispered excitedly as the princess and the prince shared a passionate kiss on screen. Izuku looked at her with a soft smile. "Yeah, it's cute." But he wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at her. Mina turned toward him and caught him watching her. "What is it?" Izuku blushed and quickly looked away. "And nothing." Mina giggled softly and rested her head on his shoulder. "Liar, I saw you looking at me a lot. Am I that pretty?" Izuku felt his face heat up, but he answered, "You're perfect." They fell into a comfortable silence, both blushing deeply, but they didn't say anything else. There was no need to. When the movie ended, they left the theater and started walking through the nighttime streets of Mizutofu. The soft glow of the streetlights illuminated the sidewalks, and the cool night air made everything feel magical. The stars shone brightly in the clear sky, and the quiet murmur of the city created a peaceful atmosphere. A street musician was sitting on a nearby bench, playing a slow and beautiful melody on his violin. The music floated through the air, wrapping around them gently. Mina smiled, clearly excited by an idea that had just crossed her mind. She turned toward Izuku and took a few steps back, making him frown in confusion. "What are you doing?" Izuku asked, looking at her curiously. Mina smiled mischievously and, with a small bow, took the edges of her dress and lifted them slightly while tilting her head. "May I have this dance, my charming prince?" Izuku blinked, surprised. But then he smiled, understanding the game. With a bow just as dramatic, he offered her his hand. "I would love to, my beautiful princess." Mina took his hand, and they stepped closer. Izuku placed one hand on her waist, and Mina rested her free hand on Izuku's shoulder. They looked into each other's eyes for a moment before Mina started moving slowly to the rhythm of the music. Izuku tried to follow her steps, though a bit clumsily. Mina smiled when she noticed his effort. "Focus on me, Midori." Izuku lifted his gaze toward her. He wasn't looking at his feet anymore or thinking about the steps. He was only looking at her face, that expression of pure joy radiating from her like a warm, comforting light. "That's it, much better." Mina smiled softly and rested her forehead against Izuku's chest, feeling a moment of calm and closeness. They let themselves be carried away by the music. The violinist changed the rhythm, making the melody even softer and more intimate. Mina spun slowly, and Izuku followed her, this time with less hesitation. Their bodies moved in perfect harmony, their eyes locked, their breaths mixing in the cold night air. Izuku slid his hand along Mina's waist, and she leaned closer into him. Both of them closed their eyes for a moment, losing themselves in the feeling of being so close. When the music ended, their faces were so close they could feel each other's breath. Without realizing it, Izuku leaned slightly toward Mina, and she leaned toward him, almost about to kiss, until the sound of applause shattered the magical moment. They turned around, startled. A small crowd had gathered around them, clapping enthusiastically. How adorable! They look like a fairy tale couple. So young and so in love. They're perfect together. Mina blushed intensely, covering her face with her hands. Ah, this is so embarrassing. I can't believe that just happened. Izuku was also bright red, but he still tossed a few coins to the musician and took Mina's hand. Let's go. Ha! Izuku started running, pulling Mina along with him. She followed, laughing as the crowd's voices faded behind them. Izuku! Mina shouted through her laughter. Where are we going? I don't know. Izuku laughed as they turned a corner and disappeared into a quieter street. After a while, they stopped at a small park. Izuku was breathing heavily, his hands resting on his knees, and Mina was also trying to catch her breath. Mina looked at him and let out a soft laugh. That was crazy. Izuku lifted his head and smiled, still breathing hard. Yeah, but it was fun, right? Mina nodded with a mischievous smile as she tried to steady her breathing. Yeah, really fun. The silence that settled between them wasn't uncomfortable but filled with a soft, warm tension. The night breeze gently brushed against their faces, and the dim glow of the streetlights reflected a soft shine in Mina's golden eyes. She tilted her head slightly as she looked at Izuku. Her heart was pounding, too fast for it to be just because of the run. Hey, Midori. Mina took a step toward him, never breaking eye contact. Izuku stepped closer too, his deep green eyes locking onto hers. Slowly, he reached out his hand toward Mina. She took it without hesitation, intertwining her fingers gently with his. Izuku felt a warm current run through his body at the feeling of her hand in his. Mina moved even closer, resting her face against Izuku's chest. She listened to the rapid beat of his heart and smiled to herself. She felt safe, loved, like she had finally found a place where she belonged. Izuku lowered his gaze. Months ago, he would have been surprised by the closeness, but thanks to Mina, that was no longer the case. He didn't pull away, instead, he softly wrapped his arms around Mina, pulling her even closer to him. He closed his eyes and rested his chin on her head, inhaling the soft scent of her hair, feeling a peace he had never experienced before. Izuku. Mina murmured. Izuku opened his eyes and looked down at her. Yeah. Mina squeezed his hand a little and took a breath, her chest rising and falling nervously. I can't hold it back anymore. Mina lifted her face and looked directly into his eyes. Her pupils sparkled under the soft glow of the streetlights, filled with determination and vulnerability. At the same time, they both opened their mouths and spoke in unison. I like you, Mina. I like you, Izuku. Their eyes widened in surprise as they stared at each other for a second before a laugh escaped their lips. Really? Izuku smiled. Mina nodded, blushing. Yeah, and you? Izuku's smile was genuine, lighting up his face. Yeah. I like you a lot, Mina. Mina lowered her gaze for a moment, biting her lip. However, her mischievous smile returned, and without warning, she grabbed Izuku's shirt with both hands, pulling him toward her. Izuku barely had time to react before Mina's lips met his in an intense, emotion-filled kiss. The warmth of her lips wrapped around him, making him lose all sense of the outside world for a moment. It only took Izuku a couple of seconds to react, but when he did, he wrapped his arms around Mina's waist and responded to the kiss with even more intensity. His hand slid up to the nape of Mina's neck, threading his fingers through her pink hair as he pulled her even closer. Mina let out a soft moan against his lips, surprised by Izuku's response, but she didn't complain. On the contrary, her hands slid up to wrap around Izuku's neck, pressing herself closer to him, letting their bodies melt together in that intimate moment. The kiss was intense. Izuku's lips moved with an unexpected confidence, and Mina let herself be completely carried away. She could feel the rapid beating of Izuku's heart, as fast as her own. Finally, they pulled apart, breathing heavily. Their foreheads rested against each other's, and their eyes met in the dim light of the night. Izuku smiled softly. Wow. Mina let out a breathless laugh. Yeah, wow. Izuku slid his hand along Mina's cheek, gently brushing her skin with his thumb. Mina closed her eyes at the touch and leaned her face into his hand. This. Izuku murmured. Does this mean we're? Mina slowly opened her eyes and smiled. That depends. Depends on what? Mina leaned in again, brushing her lips against his. On whether you kiss me again. Izuku let out a soft laugh. I think I can manage that. This time, it was Izuku who kissed her first. His lips met hers with a delicate but certain softness, and Mina smiled against his mouth before kissing him back with the same intensity. Her hand slid down Izuku's back as he held her firmly, as if afraid that if he let go, she would disappear. When they finally pulled apart, Izuku looked at her with a mix of wonder and pure happiness. Mina looked at him the same way, her golden eyes shining under the starlight. So, are we dating? Izuku asked with a shy smile. Mina smiled and gave him a playful tap on the chest. Obviously, Midori. Izuku's smile widened before he wrapped her in a tight hug, lifting her slightly off the ground. Mina let out a delighted giggle, holding onto him just as tightly. For the first time in a long while, Izuku felt like his life wasn't just a series of cruel twists of fate, but something he could hold on to with happiness. This is amazing. He whispered, closing his eyes and breathing in Mina's sweet scent. Mina rested her head on his shoulder and sighed, smiling softly. Yeah, it is. The soft murmur of the wind accompanied the sound of their intertwined breaths. The moon shone brightly above them. The stars twinkled as if they were celebrating this intimate moment between them. Izuku slid his hand down Mina's back, gently caressing the fabric of her clothes. I never thought that. Izuku began, but his voice faded as he looked at Mina with tenderness. Mina tilted her head, her golden eyes shining under the soft moonlight. What? Izuku smiled shyly, a faint blush visible on his face. That I'd be here with you, and that you'd feel the same way about me. I fell for you so quickly that it felt impossible that you could see me the same way. Mina looked at him with affection, her expression full of warmth. Gently, she caressed his cheek with the back of her hand before smiling in that bold way he loved so much. Well, believe it, Midori, because I'm damn in love with you. Izuku let out a laugh, feeling his chest warm at her words. Mina always had that unique way of expressing herself, direct and straightforward, and he adored her for it. She looked at him with a mischievous glint in her eyes. So, what do we do now? Izuku stared at her for a moment before taking her hand and intertwining his fingers with hers. Move forward, but this time, together. Mina squeezed his hand gently and moved a little closer, her forehead brushing against his. Together, and forever. Time passed quickly after that night. Izuku met All Might on the bridge, and although the encounter was exciting, things took an unexpected turn when a mud villain attacked the city. Izuku ran toward the chaos without hesitation, and this time, it was Katsumi who was trapped between the villain's dark tentacles. No, this can't be. Izuku murmured, feeling panic rise in his chest. Katsumi was trapped, and All Might wasn't reacting. Izuku clenched his fists. I can't just stand here. He ran toward the villain, charging without thinking. Panic and desperation faded as his body moved instinctively. Let her go, he shouted with all his might, hitting the villain square in the face. Katsumi looked at him with wide eyes. Midoriya. The villain growled and counterattacked, but Izuku quickly dodged, using the momentum to circle around Katsumi and free her. Hold on, Katsumi. Izuku murmured as he pulled her out of the tentacles. Then, All Might appeared with a fierce smile. Good job, young Midoriya. With a single punch, All Might destroyed the villain. Katsumi fell to the ground, but Izuku caught her before she could hit the floor. Are you okay? Izuku asked. Katsumi stared at him before looking away, blushing. TCH, thanks, nerd. Izuku simply nodded before pulling away from her. He no longer felt any love for her, he had acted as any hero would. All Might looked at him with approval. You've shown great courage today, young Midoriya. Although Izuku was scolded by the other heroes for acting recklessly, All Might also praised him for his bravery. The months of training on the beach were tough, but Mina never left Izuku's side. She was determined to be with him every step of the way, supporting him in every way she could. When Izuku told her about One for All and how All Might was now his mentor, Mina didn't hesitate for a second. If you're going to be number one, then I'll improve too to be by your side. Together, we'll be the best, Mina declared, hands on her hips and a confident smile on her face. Izuku looked at her in surprise. Are you sure? Mina stepped closer and gave him a light tap on the nose. Do you think I'm going to leave you alone in this? Not a chance, Midori. When All Might learned about Mina and that she would be his apprentice, he accepted her, although it was more by the request of his young disciple, Izuku. The hero All Might, seeing the determination in Mina's eyes, couldn't help but smile. Then, let's start with the training, he said with a smile, ready to help Mina reach her full potential, just as he had with Izuku. Mina improved rapidly. Her natural agility, combined with exercises designed to increase her strength, made her an increasingly formidable fighter. Izuku, for his part, also pushed himself to the limit, trying to lift weights that challenged his boundaries. By the end of each day, both Izuku and Mina often found themselves exhausted, panting on the ground after long and grueling combat and training sessions. You're getting better, Mina, Izuku said, breathing heavily. You too, Midori. Mina winked at him before giving him a light tap on the shoulder. 5 months later, Izuku was standing on a pile of trash on a beach that had been completely cleaned. The clear horizon showed a bright sea under the sunlight. Izuku was exhausted, his body trembling from the effort, but he couldn't help but feel incredibly good, knowing he had taken his first step to becoming a true hero. I did it! Izuku shouted with all his might before letting himself fall. But before he could hit the ground, Mina ran and caught him. I got you. Izuku opened his eyes with difficulty, looking at Mina with a weak smile. You really know how to make things grand, Mina said, smiling at him proudly. Izuku gasped. I just want to be someone you can be proud of. Mina didn't hesitate for a second and, despite him being sweaty and dirty, kissed him tenderly. Izuku closed his eyes and responded to the kiss, letting himself be enveloped by Mina's warmth. When they pulled apart, Mina smiled at him. You're such a goof. I'm already proud of you. Cough, cough. They both turned to see All Might with an awkward smile. Youngsters, I know you're excited, but there's no need to be so cheesy. Mina laughed and looked at All Might with an amused smile. Sensei, I think you're missing out on getting yourself a partner. All Might let out a loud laugh. Huh, maybe you're right. Since that day, All Might intensified the training for both Izuku and Mina, knowing that together they would form an unstoppable duo. With each session, they pushed their own limits, and All Might couldn't help but smile as he watched their progress multiply. He knew that, with time, they would become a force to be reckoned with. The last 3 months of training passed, and Mina developed a lethal combination of agility and strength, while Izuku improved his control over One for All, reaching 15% without injury. Inspired by Mina's fighting style, Izuku incorporated smooth, elegant moves into his technique. On the final day of training, Izuku and Mina exchanged a glance before facing All Might. They both knew they couldn't defeat him, but it didn't matter anymore. They had grown, they had improved, and most importantly, they had done it together. Mina took a deep breath, her golden eyes shining with determination. Izuku clenched his fists, feeling the power of One for All flowing through his body, wrapping his muscles with green lightning. All Might, standing before them, smiled confidently, his arms crossed over his imposing chest. The sea breeze ruffled his blonde hair as the afternoon sun cast long shadows over the sand. Izuku and Mina shared a brief look, and without a word, they charged at the same time. Green sparks surrounded Izuku's body as he disappeared in a flash of speed. Mina propelled herself with a flip, her feline agility taking her directly toward All Might. Izuku appeared behind him, his leg charged with energy. Smash! Izuku shouted as he launched a low kick. All Might reacted instantly, jumping and easily dodging the blow, but Mina was already on him. Gotcha! Mina exclaimed with a mischievous smile, spinning in the air and delivering a downward kick. All Might raised a hand and blocked the attack effortlessly, catching her ankle. Not bad, young Ishido. All Might's voice resonated with pride as he landed gracefully. But Mina wasn't going to let him get away that easily. Without missing a beat, she spun her body using the support of her trapped leg. Her hands glowed with a faint pink light as she aimed directly at All Might's face. Plus Ultra. The mischievous smile on her face contrasted with the intensity in her eyes. A jet of acid shot out from her palms. All Might reacted in time to cover his face with his forearm, but a few droplets hit his eyes, making his vision blurry. "Not bad, Miss Ishido," All Might said, stepping back a bit as he blinked to clear his vision. Izuku was already behind him, his muscles filled with energy. "Good night, All Might." Izuku channeled One for All into his right fist and delivered a devastating punch toward All Might's neck. But All Might, still with blurred vision, moved his arm back and caught the punch with his open palm. The air vibrated with the impact, kicking up a cloud of dust around them. "You really are the best," Izuku said with a smile, even though his muscles were trembling from the effort. All Might closed his fingers around Izuku's fist and pushed it forward, but Mina was already on him. She spun in the air, her leg glowing with a pink light as she delivered a direct kick to his side. All Might dodged with a quick movement, but Mina used the momentum to spin and fire a new burst of acid. All Might jumped to the side to avoid it, only to find Izuku appearing in front of him with a flash of green light. Detroit Smash. Izuku launched a punch packed with energy. All Might crossed his arms to block it, but the force of the blow made him stumble back several meters, leaving a trail in the sand. Izuku threw another punch, his arm glowing with the power of One for All. All Might, maintaining a firm stance, crossed his arms to block the impact, but the force was so great that it sent him back several meters, leaving a deep mark in the sand. "Come on, Mina!" Izuku shouted, gasping for air. "Got it." Mina ran toward him, leaping over the debris of the beach. Izuku interlocked his hands and gave her a boost. Mina placed a foot in his hands and, in a synchronized move, Izuku launched her into the air. Mina spun in the air, her arms extended as gravity began to pull her down. All Might waited for her, arms prepared to catch her, but Mina smiled. "Izuku." Izuku was already in position. Channeling the energy of One for All into his legs, he jumped toward her. Mina offered her hand in the air, and when their fingers touched, Izuku spun her, giving her a boost toward All Might. "Acid Meteor!" Mina shouted as she launched a powerful burst of acid directly at All Might, in the form of a high-pressure acid spiral. He had to move quickly to avoid being burned, but in a moment of distraction, Izuku appeared behind him, his fist glowing with unstoppable force. One for All. Full cowling, 25%. Izuku threw the punch toward All Might, who, still distracted by Mina, blocked the strike at the last second. The impact created an explosion of sand and dust. When the dust cloud cleared, All Might held Izuku's fist with one hand and Mina's ankle with the other. "Not bad," All Might said with a smile. "But you still have a long way to go." After that, the fight intensified even more. Less than an hour later, Izuku and Mina fell to the ground, exhausted and gasping for air, their bodies covered in sweat and bruises. Izuku ended up beside Mina on the ground, who, despite the visible bruises on her arms, couldn't help but smile with amusement, clearly satisfied with the level of their training. "Hee, who would have thought that by knowing you, I'd end up knowing All Might and getting this beaten up?" Mina joked, resting her head on Izuku's shoulder. Izuku smiled weakly from the effort. "I guess that makes us a team, huh?" Mina looked at him and slid her hand down his cheek. "We're more than a team, Izuku." Izuku turned his head to look directly into her eyes. "And what are we then?" Mina slowly leaned in, her lips brushing his before whispering, "Everything." Without giving him time to respond, Mina kissed him gently. Izuku closed his eyes, surrendering to the moment as his body still trembled from the effort of the battle. A coughing sound interrupted the moment. "Cough, cough." All Might faked a cough, placing his hands on his temples. He had seen that scene many times, but he still couldn't get used to it. "I know you're excited, but, do you really have to be so sappy?" Mina slowly pulled away from Izuku, smiling playfully. As always, she responded the same way, "Sensei, I think what you're missing is finding yourself a partner." All Might let out a hearty laugh, already used to the response, and shrugged. "Maybe." Izuku and Mina laughed as well. As All Might walked away to give them some space, Izuku took Mina's hand and intertwined his fingers with hers. Do you think we're ready for UA? Izuku asked, his voice still a bit ragged from the intense fight with All Might. Mina threaded her fingers through his, feeling the warmth of his skin. The sea breeze tousled her pink hair as she gazed at the horizon, tinged with orange hues. If we're together, we will be. Izuku turned his head to look at her. Despite the bruises and exhaustion, she was smiling with a confidence that made him feel invincible. Then we'll give our best effort. Izuku squeezed her hand firmly. Mina laughed softly and rested her head on his shoulder. Just promise me you won't be too amazing. I don't want you stealing all the spotlight. Izuku let out a low laugh. I can't promise that. Although, it's likely that we'll end up shining together. Mina looked at him intensely, and before he could respond, their lips met in a brief kiss, but one full of emotion. A new path was waiting for them, and neither of them planned to walk it alone. And so, they entered UA. From day one, they stood out as an unstoppable duo. Their teamwork and skills made them shine in every test, surpassing many of their peers with an astonishing synchronization. The sports festival was their first big victory. Mina and Izuku dominated each round, combining strength, strategy, and creativity. In the final, they ended up facing each other, and although Izuku won, it was by such a narrow margin that the media couldn't stop talking about the Acid Queen and the new symbol of hope. But their rise didn't stop there. During the mission against the Yakuza, they were key players in the defeat of Kai Chisaki and the rescue of Eri. Izuku, with his growing mastery of One for All, and Mina, with her destructive acid and combat cunning, became the sensation of Japan. They were also crucial in the fight against the League of Villains, facing enemies that even professional heroes feared. Each mission, each battle, made them stronger, but also more famous. And fame, as always, brought envy. Katsuki Bakugo watched them from afar, his brows furrowed and his fists clenched. Since that fateful day when he saw Izuku and Mina in that ridiculous princess dress, he had tried to ignore them. But it was becoming harder. The first great blow to his pride came when he found out that not only had Mina entered UA, but Izuku too, the same boy he had called useless his entire life. How the hell did this happen? He had shouted at home, furious, wondering how it was possible. But the worst part wasn't that he got in. It was discovering that he had scored higher than him. And the most confusing part, Izuku, the boy without a quirk, now had one. Katsumi tried to figure out where the hell he had gotten it from, but Izuku never gave her an answer. He simply looked at her calmly, with a smile that made her blood boil. And then, there was his popularity. Katsumi had been raised to be the best. She was a prodigy, a Bakugo, one in a million. The spotlight was supposed to be hers, but now, whenever she opened the news, she saw Izuku and Mina. I'm sick of this, she muttered angrily, kicking her desk. She couldn't allow it. And that's why, at 2 in the morning, she made a drastic decision. With an explosion, she blew the doorknob off Izuku's room and shoved the door open with force. Where the fuck is he? She growled upon seeing the empty room. Her eyes narrowed as her mind offered her a disturbing possibility. No. It couldn't be. Without letting herself think too much, she turned around and marched straight toward Mina's room. Without hesitation, she lifted a leg and launched an explosive kick at the door. The wood groaned before it swung open violently. And there she saw them. Izuku and Mina were lying in bed. Katsumi's brain took a few seconds to process it, but when it did, she felt something inside her shatter. Her expression twisted into pure fury, her pupils dilated with rage and something else she refused to acknowledge. You cheating bastard, she screamed, completely losing control. The air vibrated with the intensity of her wrath as she raised both hands, letting explosive energy build in her palms. Without a second thought, she unleashed all that fury in a devastating explosion. Flames erupted with a ferocious roar, engulfing the room in seconds. Chunks of charred wood flew through the air, and a shockwave rattled the entire hallway. The alarms of UA blared instantly, accompanied by a robotic voice alerting the entire campus. Class 1A sector under attack. I repeat, under attack. Immediate intervention from teachers and security personnel required. The thunderous sound of hurried footsteps echoed from all corners of the academy. The flames cast an ominous orange glow over the hallway. Amidst the destruction, Katsumi stood with heavy breaths and a twisted grin on her face. Her pupils gleamed with a sickening mix of adrenaline and euphoria. Momo and Ochako arrived running, freezing at the sight before them. The fire consumed what had once been Mina's room, and where there had been a wall, now only a gaping hole remained, exposing the outside. Ochako took a shaky step back. "God, what did you do, Bakugo?" Momo, her face pale, stepped forward with determination and grabbed Katsumi's shoulder, shaking her. "What the hell did you do, Bakugo?" Katsumi didn't even look at her. Her grin remained, twisted, as if she found the whole thing some kind of sick joke. "I gave a cheater what he deserved." Before Momo could react, Katsumi spun and delivered a punch straight to her face. A sharp crack echoed through the air as the impact broke Momo's nose, making her stumble backward. Momo clutched her face, feeling the warm trickle of blood running down her lips. The commotion drew more people. Several students gathered around, murmuring in shock. It didn't take long before the teachers arrived. Aizawa emerged from the crowd, his gaze filled with restrained fury. Without wasting a second, he activated his quirk and locked eyes on Katsumi. "Bakugo, put your hands down." Katsumi laughed without emotion. "Don't fuck with me, Aizawa. This is a personal matter." Aizawa narrowed his eyes, keeping her in his line of sight to nullify any attempt at an explosion. "Don't make me repeat myself." The other students watched her with expressions of disbelief and fear. Denki stepped forward. "Katsumi, this is insane. What the hell are you doing?" She looked at him mockingly. "What none of you ever had the guts to do. Putting that nerd in his place." Kirishima frowned, his jaw clenched. "Since when is Izuku your boyfriend?" Katsumi looked at him as if he had just said the dumbest thing in the world. "He always has been. He just doesn't know it yet." An uncomfortable murmur spread through the crowd. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "I thought you were crazy, but now I see you're a fucking psychopath." Mina emerged from the smoking remains of the destroyed room, holding Izuku's injured body. Her skin was marked with burns and open wounds, blood dripping down her arm, yet her hand remained tightly clasped around Izuku's, making sure he was okay. Izuku could barely stay conscious after using his body as a shield to protect his girlfriend from the blast. His breathing was ragged and unsteady, but even in that state, his instinct to protect her never wavered. Mina, her head lowered and fists clenched, felt rage burning inside her at the sight of her boyfriend like this. Katsumi felt her world tilt. Her expression shifted from rage to confusion and then to sheer disbelief. How the hell did you survive, Bubblegum?" Mina didn't even look at her. Carefully, she placed Izuku in Kyoka's arms, who immediately began checking his condition. She let out a relieved sigh upon realizing that, despite his severe injuries, his life was not in danger. Using her quirk, she confirmed it. Mina, however, walked straight toward Katsumi. Every step was firm. Every step radiated an oppressive fury. Her boyfriend had prioritized her safety, using his body as a shield to keep her from harm. And now, she stared with pure hatred at the one responsible for hurting him. Her usual golden eyes, always full of energy and joy, now burned a deep red, like blood. A shiver ran down Katsumi's spine. "Take one more step and I'll attack." Mina didn't stop. Without warning, Katsumi tried to activate her quirk, but her reaction was too slow. Mina struck her directly in the center of her chest, knocking the air out of her lungs for a moment. Katsumi tried to retaliate with a right hook boosted by an explosion, but Mina dodged it and used the momentum to grab her and slam her to the ground with unexpected brutality. Before she could get up, a thick gray tape wrapped tightly around them, immobilizing them completely. Aizawa watched them with a severe expression, his patience completely drained. Without a word, he dragged them both out of UA and released them in a secluded area. "Once this is over, you will face severe punishment, especially you, Katsumi." Katsumi didn't respond. Her breathing was heavy, her body still burning with adrenaline and rage. Mina, on the other hand, didn't move immediately, evaluating her with those red eyes blazing with fury. Without another word, the fight began. Katsumi moved first, launching herself forward with a fist wrapped in small explosions. Mina dodged, feeling the scorching heat graze her cheek, but countered with a low sweep that Katsumi jumped over effortlessly. I'm going to tear you apart, bubblegum. Katsumi growled, charging another explosion in her hand. Mina wasn't far behind. Propelling herself forward with acid from her feet, she closed the distance between them in a blink and landed a punch to Katsumi's ribs, making her grunt in pain. But Katsumi didn't stop. With a roar, she fired a point-blank explosion. Mina managed to cross her arms in time, but the impact sent her flying backward, crashing hard onto the ground. Without giving her a chance to recover, Katsumi sprinted toward her, attempting to stomp on her stomach with an explosion, but Mina twisted her body just in time, avoiding the hit and countering with a stream of acid straight at Katsumi's leg. Katsumi jumped immediately, dodging most of the attack, but the acid still left burn marks on her skin. Both were breathing heavily, yet neither was willing to back down. The fight continued in a flurry of punches, explosions, and acid attacks. Mina tried to stay calm, but every time her gaze met Katsumi's, the fury inside her grew, slowly clouding her focus. Katsumi, on the other hand, attacked with unbridled rage, each strike more violent than the last. In her twisted mind, Mina wasn't just an opponent, she was the thief who had stolen Izuku from her. An entire hour passed, and both were at their limit. Their punches had become slower. Their bodies were covered in bruises, scratches, and open wounds. With the last of their strength, they both rushed at each other, neither willing to retreat. Their fists flew at the same time, both landing a direct hit to the other's face. Katsumi staggered, feeling the burn on her skin, but it was Mina who fell first, hitting the ground hard. Gasping, her body trembling from exhaustion, Katsumi looked down at her with a satisfied smile. "See? You're still inferior." But before she could say another word, a foot crashed into her face with brutal force. The impact sent her sprawling to the ground violently, her head ringing as a metallic taste filled her mouth. Mina stood up slowly, spitting out a bit of blood and wiping her lip with the back of her hand. "Inferior, you say?" Mina said, dusting off her clothes with a smug smile, looking down at her triumphantly. "I don't think so. From up here, the only inferior one I see is you." Katsumi glared at her, but before she could get a single word out, Mina stepped forward, her smile fading into a completely serious expression. "And next time, don't mess with my boyfriend. Did you hear me? He's my boyfriend." The words cut through Katsumi like a dagger. She felt the air leave her lungs. Her body, which moments ago had been burning with rage, now only trembled. Her mind refused to process it, but her heart understood the truth immediately. Izuku. Izuku no longer looked at her. And it was all her fault. No one else's. That tough, arrogant facade she had always carried shattered in an instant. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes, once filled with fury, blurred with tears. Because for the first time in her life, Katsumi Bakugo realized she had lost something she could never get back. She couldn't hold it in any longer. "But I love him." Her voice broke, and her tears fell one after another. Mina looked at her with disgust. "Izuku told me everything you did. Deny it all you want, but you never loved him. Because if you had, you never would have hurt him." She turned to leave, but before she could take a step, she felt something gripping her leg. Katsumi clung to her desperately, her face drenched in tears and dirt. "Please. Give him back to me. I love him more than you do." That was the last straw. Mina turned immediately, her hand covered in acid. Without hesitation, she pressed her palm against Katsumi's face. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the night. Katsumi tore away instantly, clutching her burning face. Her skin seared, and blisters began to form from the acid. Mina watched her without a trace of mercy. "Every time you look in the mirror, you'll remember this day and know that you lost to me. Izuku will never be yours. He will never go back to you. And I hope you suffer. I hope you live in misery because that's exactly what someone like you deserves." Without another word, she walked away. Katsumi's screams and sobs faded behind her. Mina didn't stop. She had only one destination in mind. When she arrived at the infirmary, she found Izuku resting in bed. His body was wrapped in bandages, but his eyes lit up the moment he saw her enter. With a playful smile, Izuku sighed. "My best medicine would be feeling your soft thighs. If only there were a nurse who could prescribe that." His mischievous grin showed he was still trying to lighten the mood despite his condition. Mina rolled her eyes but couldn't stop herself from smiling. She sat beside the bed, letting him rest his head on her lap. "What happened to my shy boyfriend?" she asked with fake sadness. Izuku chuckled softly. "Well, you'd have to ask the person who took his innocence in bed." Mina immediately blushed, turning her gaze away. "But I never heard you complain." Izuku smirked and nestled closer. "How could I complain when the sexiest woman was giving herself to me?" Mina pouted. "And who is this beautiful woman you're talking about?" Izuku chuckled. "Her name is Mina. She's charismatic, super social, loves making jokes, and has the prettiest smile in the world." He kept showering her with cheesy compliments until Mina, completely red, covered his mouth with her hand. "Don't think flattery is going to get you anything." She smirked playfully. After a few moments of silence, she slowly removed her hand from his mouth. He could see the worry still lingering in her eyes, the guilt weighing on her. Gently, he lifted his hand to caress her beautiful face, gazing at her with pure affection. "I love you, my bubblegum princess." His voice was soft, his smile warm. Mina's expression melted into tenderness, her heart softening at his words. "I love you too, my silly prince." Her voice was filled with affection. And without another word, their lips met in a sweet and lingering kiss. Meanwhile, in an isolated room, Katsumi screamed and thrashed violently against the hospital bed where she had been restrained. The security straps creaked under the strain of her strength, but they didn't give way. Her face was covered in tears and sweat, her pupils blown wide from the mixture of rage and desperation consuming her. "Izuku! Izuku, you damn idiot, it's me, please come back to me." Her scream echoed through the halls, filled with anguish and desperation. She struggled against the straps, pulling so hard that the skin on her wrists tore open, but the pain was nothing compared to the fear devouring her. "Mina, you damn bitch. This is your fault. I hate you. I hate you." Her throat burned, on the verge of giving out, but she didn't care. Tears streamed uncontrollably down her face, her ragged breaths mirroring the storm inside her chest. Then suddenly, a broken, almost deranged laugh escaped her lips as her face twisted in pure agony. "Why, Izuku? Why her and not me?" Her voice cracked, and in her eyes, there was nothing but the dull glimmer of defeat. Because no matter how much she screamed, no matter how hard she fought, Izuku no longer belonged to her. Or rather, he never did after she betrayed him. But knowing he was with someone else now, seeing her smile beside Izuku, it burned her inside, in a way far more agonizing than the acid that had scarred her face. Katsumi stopped struggling, her strength completely drained. She closed her eyes, a bitter smile appearing on her lips. "Heh. In the end, I lost." Time skip. 17 years later. A thunderous crash shook the streets of Mizurufu. The wail of sirens and screeching police cars echoed everywhere as a villain covered in scales and razor-sharp claws charged through the crowd, leaving a trail of fire scorching the pavement. But something strange happened. The people weren't running in panic. They were waiting. Waiting for their heroes. Because they knew that the prodigies of this new generation wouldn't take long to arrive. A pink streak shot across the street at an astonishing speed, leaving behind a trail of crackling energy. The villain barely had time to react before an 11-year-old girl appeared in front of him, blocking his path. Her pink hair flowed in the wind, styled into two small buns atop her head, with a pair of little horns peeking through. Her face bore the signature freckles of her father, and her green eyes sparkled with playful intensity. Her hero costume was a sleeker, more fitted version of the one Mina had once worn. The girl smiled confidently, stretching out her hand. "Dude, if I were you, I'd surrender now." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "It's her. Haru Midoriya. Deku and Pinky's daughter. The prodigy heroine." The villain clenched his teeth. "I don't give a damn who your parents are," he growled, extending his hand to unleash a powerful fire blast straight at her. But Haru didn't move. Her confident smile remained intact as her right hand crackled with overflowing pink lightning. With a fluid motion, she swung her fist upward. The fire blast was absorbed by the force of her strike, redirected straight into the sky in a brilliant explosion of light that illuminated the entire district. The crowd erupted in cheers. That's Haru. The future #1. She's just like her parents. From within the crowd, calm footsteps could be heard. A boy with pink hair tipped in green walked forward with his hands in his pockets, his expression showing nothing but boredom. His hero suit was slightly disheveled, and his messy hair only added to his careless appearance, but his presence was unmistakable. Even though he resembled his mother, Mina, there was a quietness about him that was eerily reminiscent of Izuku in his most cold and calculating moments. Well, well. Little sister, why did you leave me behind? He yawned with a lazy smile. Haru smiled nervously, turning toward him. Anakin. But I told you. And it was 15 times. The boy continued walking toward her, his hands still tucked into his pockets. When he reached her side, he ruffled her hair with an easygoing smile. Anakin, I'm not a little kid anymore. Haru pouted as she tried to swat his hand away. Sure, whatever you say. Yumajiro Midoriya, 12 years old, smiled. He was the firstborn of Izuku and Mina, but his expression suddenly turned cold when the villain stood up and shouted, "Damn brats. Who do you think you are, ignoring me like this?" Yumajiro looked at him with dark green eyes that made the villain freeze on the spot. The boy raised a hand, and his aura flared up, turning into a brilliant green that wrapped around his body in a mesmerizing pattern of glowing lines. Leave. His voice, quiet yet filled with an undeniable authority, carried a weight that seemed to press down on everything around them. The villain was suddenly hurled into the air by an invisible force, shot skyward with such violence that when he reached his peak, he crashed into a nearby wall. Before he could react, several steel beams twisted and wrapped around him, locking him in place completely. The crowd fell silent for a moment, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Then, cheers erupted. Oh my god, that's the strongest telekinetic quirk in the world. Unbelievable, there's no doubt they're prodigies. The new generation of heroes is simply incredible. Haru shot an accusatory glance at her brother. Anakin, was it really necessary to launch him that far? Yumajiro yawned, stuffing his hands back into his pockets. I didn't want to waste more time. Haru rolled her eyes. You need to be nicer. I will when you stop acting so overconfident. That's never gonna happen. Haru stuck out her tongue at him. Yumajiro let out a soft chuckle and ruffled her hair again, earning another annoyed pout from his sister. The crowd kept cheering, shouting their names and clapping loudly. Some small children waved flags bearing the Midoriya emblem, while the adults watched with a mix of admiration and relief. Haru. Yumajiro. You're amazing. You saved us. Haru raised a hand and grinned from ear to ear, tiny pink sparks crackling at her fingertips. Thank you for believing in us, she exclaimed enthusiastically. Yumajiro sighed, resting his hands behind his head as he let out a lazy yawn. Haru, stop showing off already. Haru placed her hands on her hips, looking at him with an exaggeratedly offended expression. It's not showing off, I'm just being nice. Sure. Nice. Yumajiro smirked, knowing his sister sometimes got carried away with the attention, but it was nothing a good big brother scolding couldn't keep in check. On top of one of the nearby buildings, two figures watched the scene with pride and warmth in their eyes. Izuku and Mina sat on the edge, their legs dangling over the open air. The wind tousled their hair slightly as they gazed down at their children with soft smiles. They're incredible. Mina said, her voice filled with excitement, her eyes glistening with tears that threatened to spill. Izuku looked at her with tenderness, moving closer as he wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her into his embrace. Their bodies fit together perfectly, like two puzzle pieces meant to be. They had an amazing mother, Izuku said with a nostalgic smile. Mina turned her face toward him, a faint blush coloring her cheeks, and a knowing smile curved her lips. And they had an amazing father to look up to. Izuku smiled and pressed his forehead against hers. You really think so? I know so, Mina answered confidently, her hand sliding over his cheek, gently caressing a scar he bore, a reminder of his battle against AFO. Izuku closed his eyes and leaned in, pulling her into a deep, tender kiss. The sound of the cheering crowd seemed to fade away, as if the whole world had stopped at that moment, leaving only the warmth of their entwined bodies and the synchronized beat of their hearts. Everything felt exactly as it should be. When they pulled away, Mina looked at him with that same adoring expression she had carried throughout the years, as if nothing could ever change what they felt for each other. "I love you, Izuku," she whispered with a smile. Izuku smiled back, running his fingers gently through her pink hair. "I love you more, Mina." They both chuckled softly, resting their foreheads together as they continued watching their children with a mix of love and pride. Haru was still chatting animatedly with the citizens, while Yumajiro, as always, had already found a comfortable spot to rest, seemingly unaffected by all the commotion around him. Izuku intertwined his fingers with Mina's, a deep sense of peace settling in his chest. "Seeing them like this, knowing they'll be the ones to carry Japan's future, it puts me at ease." Mina nodded, resting her head on his shoulder as she smiled sweetly. "We did a great job, don't you think?" "Yeah, we did an amazing job. Although, I think Yumajiro still needs some vitamins," as always, he joked, making Mina laugh. She giggled affectionately. "If he had as much energy as you or me, he would have stolen your title as the strongest a long time ago." Izuku laughed too, knowing that while both their children were powerful, Yumajiro would undoubtedly have the upper hand if he weren't so lazy. The wind blew softly, caressing their faces as they watched their children stand out among the crowd like two stars shining brightly, knowing they would be the ones to guide the next generation. With that image etched into their hearts, the sun slowly began to set, marking the end of an era and the beginning of a new one, filled with hope and love. End of story. Thank you to everyone who watches my videos. I really appreciate the support you give. I hope the translation is correct. If there was any mistake, I apologize. Take care and see you next time.